Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Ankit Jain, your trainer for today. I'll be taking this webinar, interesting webinar, where we will be trying to understand what is DevSecOps. We shall discuss the different concepts inside it and try to be more friendlier with it. This is the meetup group page where you can get all the updates of the upcoming webinars in Edureka. So the agenda for today's webinar will be, we'll start by understanding why DevSecOps, what is DevSec and Ops, what are the principles of this framework, what are the advantages of this framework. We'll try to implement DevSecOps testing and tools, and lastly, we'll try to have a hands-on session. So this will be the agenda for today's class. Okay. So what is the definition of DevSecOps? What is it? So let us understand that. Now, what are the role of hackers? The hackers are always looking for ways to deploy malware, right? They are always looking for ways to deploy malware in all the applications which we develop, right? This is the role of a hacker. As the role of a developer is to develop good softwares, the role of a hacker is to deploy malware. Now, DevOps, as you all know, is the merger of the development or the developer group and the operations group. It's a framework that's known as DevOps, where the developer team and the operations team, the multiple teams are working together. If you include the information security part to it, to that framework, then that is what we call as the development security and operations, or DevSecOps. Okay, it includes the information security, the development, and the operations. The merger of these three groups into a single group so that all of them in this framework can work with each other together real time, that is known as DevSecOps. So as I explained, DevSecOps is basically security enabled DevOps. It is an early integration of secure culture, tools, and practices into each phase of development and operations process. So normally, if you remember the software security operations, let me write down here. Normally, if you remember previously in a typical organization during the development phase, software security operations it was carried out separately from the other processes required to produce a software. So it was not taken as a part of a software development process, but it was taken as a feature which was separately dealt with, right? Before DevSecOps, developers wrote code and IT teams deployed it without giving much thought, right? So developers wrote the codes and the IT teams deployed it into the production phase without much thought into security. Now, the security engineers would only check for potential vulnerabilities in the code or the environments hosting it after the software was written and placed in production environment. So suppose, imagine yourself that you are a developer who has developed a software. The operations team will deploy this software into the production environment. Now, only when it was deployed, after that, the security engineers used to monitor it, right? Typically, when they used to see some bugs or something, which actually, disrupted them, then we used to give it to the security engineers. So basically, only after the software was deployed into the production environment that the security engineers came into picture. Now, this in today's world where we are working on cloud, right, mostly hosting our applications on cloud, the speed of deployment is accelerated. Is it clear to everyone that in today's world with cloud deployments, software lifecycle has been accelerated. But it has also been seen that as soon as it was deployed, there were some issues and it had to be written back or retraced back. So this means that during the software development stage, right, from developer to the deployment phase, the security was completely ignored, right? So in order to handle this problem, we have something known as that, okay, you are developing, you're also operationalizing, but you will have to take into consideration security of the application. So this is known as DevSec. Now, what are the typical roles in DevSecOps? I will be discussing that. So first, let us look into what are the principles of DevSecOps. Okay, what are the principles of DevSecOps? So if you all see, the DevSecOps can be included into 5 groups. One is positioning. The principles of DevSecOps are 5: positioning, ruggedness, drills, awareness, and lastly you have chaos. Now here, what is positioning? Positioning is basically, in DevSecOps, it is a rule that each security flaw will be looked and identified one by one. Okay, so each security flaw will be looked and identified one by one. The other is ruggedness. So the code which you write should have robustness, or what we call, it should withstand critique. Now there is a team, like in typical security drills, there is a team which will find vulnerabilities in your software and will use them in software. So basically they will identify what vulnerabilities are there in your software which you are developing from time to time, and they will use them in the software. So they will basically jump that into the software. Awareness, it means in every resource is logged. Okay, that's the thumb rule for awareness. You should be aware of what is going on. Every resource needs to be logged. Also, it expects chaos to occur. That's the principle. So if you're working in a DevSecOps group, you will always expect that there will be some chaos in your software. Okay, that is the assumption. So these are the 5 principles on which DevSecOps has been formulated. That is positioning, ruggedness, drills, awareness, and chaos. Now, what are the advantages? We have talked about what is DevOps, DevSecOps, what are its principles. Let us think about its advantages. So the advantages are: one, spotting vulnerabilities and bugs early. Okay. Second is, all of you know that most of the companies are now using open source software. Most of the companies are now using open source tools, right? Now, open source tools has one major problem, that the security is the issue. If I have to give a layman understanding of it, Android is there, and iOS, right? Apple uses iOS. Now Android, you all know, will have a lot of bugs, but the advantage is it is free. Anyone can install it. iOS is a software, paid software from Apple. It's a proprietary software of Apple. It has more better security features, right? Now Android, which is free, which is open source, if you want to use this with better confidence, then what we will do? we will, if we apply DevSecOps, we will have a check on those softwares developed with Android. So open source tools can be used with more confidence. Third is it will save cost on resource management, right? Resource management, it will save cost. Make developers security aware. So they know the constant interaction with the development team will lead to better security awareness. And at the end, it will reduce the legal risk. If your software is being used by some other company and have some issues with the security, you will reduce the legal risk and the liabilities associated. Let us move ahead and try to understand how do we implement DevSecOps. So we have understood what is DevSecOps, right? We have understood why it is required, what are its advantages, and now we shall understand how will we implement DevSecOps. Okay, let us understand how will we implement DevSecOps. So the first step is obviously development. During development, we will have a check from security point of view. What are the plugins of IDE, integrated development, you're using? What are the pre-commit hooks? And we'll also carry out third-party component scan. Version control. So for version control, there will be security features such as repository scan, secret management. Pre-build. During pre-build, the security aspects that need to be linked into are static app and the security testing of it. Post-build, once the software has been built, we'll look at the dynamic app security testing, the testing of the container and its cloud security. Quality and QA, during QA check, we will have a look at the security testing. Third-party component scan shall be conducted again. Staging. At the staging stage, we'll have a look at the manageability testing and the penetration testing. Production. So at the production stage, the infrastructure as a service security, wherever you're deploying the model, we'll have to check the security of that infrastructure and the compliance of the code. Okay, so all these aspects will be looked into from development to production, and once it is productionized, during the monitoring stage, all the security monitoring and alerting will be taken into action. So if you see, throughout the stage of development to the stage of production, and from production where the monitoring is carried out, security scanning and vulnerability management is a part of each step. Okay, it's a part of each step. This is what is required in order to implement DevSecOps. Now, what are the testing and tools used for DevSecOps? For the CI/CD pipeline, the testing is pre-commit checks, commit time checks, build time checks, test time checks, and deploy time checks. During all these checks, there are certain things which we need to look into. What are those? So, for example, for the pre-commit checks, we need to look at what is the trigger threat modeling, what is the trigger ARA, the trigger manual code review, email notifications, and configuration review. So all these things will be taken care into when you are doing DevSecOps. Next is commit time checks. During commit time checks, whenever we are committing any code, they will look into compile and build the code, run SAS, T rules, tools, automatic security training, gather metrics, and break the build. Build time checks. At the build time checks, we'll have a look at comprehensive SAST, SCA, risk-based security testing will be done. We will gather all the metrics and we'll be breaking the build. What are the aspects during test time checks? We'll have a look at broader SAST, DAST, AST. Malicious code detection will be taken check off. We will again gather the metrics and we'll break the build. Okay. So these are the 5 features which we will look into. Coming into the last time, when we'll do checks for deploy time, we'll take into care of configuration management and provisioning runtime environment. And secondly, we'll have a look at post deployment checks, that is during the after the deployment has been made of the application. We'll have the security scanning, vulnerability scanning, bug bounty program, and threat intelligence. So these 4 aspects will be looked into. So these were the major uh, major steps when we make different commits at different stages of software development in DevOps framework. Now, before I move ahead and show you more complicated things, I know many of you are still trying to understand about DevOps. In this, when I took the survey, many of you didn't know what is DevOps framework. So I'm taking a detour and going to explain you more in detail about DevOps, okay, and how security has been taken into consideration. So if you look at this, what happens is, suppose you are a developer, okay, who is developing a software, okay, and this software has been developed say on Python version 3.6, okay, and it requires various packages, and while writing the code you had used Linux, okay. Now this is the developer team, okay. Now imagine this, there are multiple developers working on the same software, right? So here also a lot of version control is required at developer stage. Now when it comes to the product operation stage, okay, operation team will take this software, you will pass this software to the operations team, they will try to deploy it, but when they are deploying it they are using a Windows Server edition, they are not using Linux, okay. And also all the environment required to run this package, this software, is also not known. So what will happen, there will be lot of confusion. At the end, what will the operations team say, that your code is not working, code not working. So what will the developer team say, that you are not using the correct environment, you are not using correct environment. So you may understand lot of emails will go about trying to make this software work. And suppose even if this software is working now, what has happened, because there is a change in requirements have been added or changed, this developer has developed a new model or a new software with additional features. Now again this will be a headache for the operations team to deploy it, to understand the new changes, etc. So, and after operations has deployed it, there may be some feedback which needs to go back to the developer so that they can develop according to the feedback. So this will lead to a lot of confusion, okay. So in order to avoid this, we have something known as DevOps, okay. Now DevOps is not a tool, it's not a tool, okay. It is just a mindset, or I will say framework, for developing software, okay. So for developing software there is a framework known as DevOps, okay. Now as per this framework, the developer team and the operations team, they work together, okay. So all the developers will push their code into a repo, what we'll also call Git, and they will also containerize it, they will make dockers out of it, so that this repo can be used seamlessly by the operations team, who are actually using this and trying to develop their applications, okay. So this seamless operations between, And once the operations team get feedback, they will put it back to the developer. They will put a new commit. The operations team can check that and give that the feedback. Okay. So this is continuously integrated. The changes are continuously integrated, and also it is getting continuously deployed. Now in this, if you see continuous integration and continuous deployment, one aspect was missing, which was testing of the developed software, or the security features, security threat to this software, whether the codes have been written properly, whether the codes have been passed on to the developer team are the latest ones, do they have had any security debugging, etc. required. So for this, they have included now in DevOps security aspects of your software, which is known as DevSecOps. So this is what is known as DevSecOps, where security has also been taken into care. Okay. So I'll end the session here today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much for your attention. This is Ankit signing off.